Even more bad news for the men of the UK. Misogyny to be treated as extremism by the UK government. Now, what is misogyny actually? Not what they claim to be. What is it actually? Misogyny is men reacting to misandry. I'm going to repeat that. Misogyny is actually men reacting to misandry. Women abuse men and men fight back, right? And of course, we could get into this article and I'll put it in there, but I think it's better to look at this clip from the ABC, okay? And they'll talk about misogyny and why extremism. Why isn't is it good enough for hate speech or something like that? Because they're upping the level of villainy for men fighting back against misandry. It's to impose even greater punishments for men standing up for themselves as men.
The UK government has announced plans to treat hatred of women as a form of extremism. A review of the UK's counter-extremism strategy has been ordered to determine how best to tackle this growing threat. Dr. Sarah Mega from the University of Melbourne researches the relationship between misogynistic beliefs and violent extremism. And
See, they're always trying to do that. They're always trying to attach men standing up for themselves as being violent, right? Hey guys, did you ever notice they did this with games like Dungeons and Dragons and music like heavy metal? Anything that primarily has guys involved? This has always been the case. They tried and hitched its wagons to violence in order to make an excuse to punish innocent people. Innocent
joins us now. Dr. Mega, thank you for your time. Now, you actually met with the...
Now, of course, this is Melbourne. Australia is another shithole for men. But what I want to point out is, look how young this woman is. Is she even 32? All these misogynistic, patriarchal, countries have all these young do-nothing women who've never never achieved anything, just showing up in positions of authority and being put their faces on screen, right? It's a trend. It's no different than AOC in America, right?
UK's Home Office in June.
These patriarchal societies want pretty young women around, and they're willing to give them freebies.
What in particular did they want to ask about your research as they considered this move?
They were quite interested in exploring this link further and have been for a couple of years. We've been in consultations because of some high-profile events like the murder of Sarah Everard.
Sarah Everard was a woman who was killed by a man, a single woman killed by a single man. And they already tried to make a 6 p.m. curfew for men in England over it. Right. So this guy, whoever he is, we don't even know his name, who murdered this woman, did he belong to an ideology? No. Didn't. If he was, it would have been mentioned by now. Right? So for them to bring this up, for her to bring this up, this is a perfect example that shows this woman is a hate monger. She's a bigot. Doctor, whatever your name is, you're an awful person. You are no better than the Grand Master of the KKK. And I mean that. This is an exaggeration. This is what it is.
A few years ago in the UK, the recognition that a number of these violent extremist groups expressed quite hostile, misogynistic ideologies. And so they were...
Just what? Name them. Right? Since they're attacking all of men, they can't turn around and be too specific. Because then men can turn around and say, I don't belong to that group. Right? And again, Sarah Everard, her murderer had nothing to do with any of these groups, supposedly. Whatever the groups are, who knows what they are, right?
We're interested in how, policy-wise, we might make better use of an understanding of what is this connection between misogynistic attitudes and support for violent extremism.
Misogynistic attitudes. See, she's not talking about violence now. It's just men's attitudes, right? They don't know their place. These niggers don't know their place.
So what's your reaction to the UK's plans to treat misogyny or extreme misogyny as a form of extremism?
And again, what is extreme misogyny? Can men just turn around and say, oh, I wasn't extremely misogynistic, I was just misogynistic? I'm going to say what it's actually going to be. It's any kind, for one thing, you got to remember, misogyny is men fighting against misandry. That's what it is. So extreme misogyny will be a fight against misandry that is effective, right? So Andrew Tate, he'll be considered just a misogynist. He won't get hurt because he's not effective and at fighting back against misandry. But the pro-male collective will be an example of a group of guys who get, into the extreme category. Because we'll point out things like, hey, children aren't human beings to women, right? The women will abort these children when they don't want them, but then the child is used as a tool to enslave a man to child support. Complete injustice, not just unfairness, injustice in society. Pointing that out will actually be considered an extreme version of misogyny.
Generally, I'm in favor of, this move to try and better understand what the connection is. But I think perhaps isolating extreme misogyny as its own form of violent extremism, rather than understanding how it underpins and is causal of various forms of violent extremism, as our research finds, might be a bit problematic, because by segmenting it off as its own isolated form of ideology and maybe associated only with incel extremism, for example.
There you go, guys. She's saying we can't isolate it because we're attacking all men. How do we put every man under the umbrella and say, you're not being jailed right now, but it can happen anytime. Anytime we decide to point our finger at you. Do you see that she's admitting it?
Example, this misses how a number of varieties of political ideology across the right-wing spectrum is.
Aha, you see, the left wing has embraced feminism, the hate movement, and the right wing hasn't officially done it. It really has. The right wing gets together with TERFs all the time. Right, so, but still, they're going to say right wing. What it is guys who have to fight against misandry have no wiggle room in the left wing. So they go to the right wing hoping to find some kind of support there. That's why she's mentioning right wing.
Islamism, even amongst left-wing extremist groups, misogyny in our research was found to be a causal factor amongst all these forms.
And you had to separate the types of sexism when you undertook that research. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, we use this measure developed by psychologists and tested in a number of contexts around the world, called the ambivalent sexism inventory.
So this is extremism they're talking about, but now they're talking about ambivalent sexism, right? Tell me, how does such a young, pretty woman have the voice of someone's grandmother?
We measure for what's called benevolent sexist attitudes, sort of beliefs that men and women are different but compatible, have separate spheres where they should be operating in, and women deserve protection. This is distinct from what's called hostile sexist attitudes, or what we use in our research as misogyny indicators, right? Belief that women are less valuable and don't deserve the same treatment as men. And those are the attitudes.
But what they're really saying is men put more into the system, so men deserve more. It's actually a form of equality that they're against. Remember, feminists are a hate group. They're against truth and they're against equality. and they're against fairness. They're against what's right.
That we found to be quite significant in predicting an individual's support for various forms of violent extremism.
And is that worrying form of misogyny, particularly worrying, I should say, gaining traction? And what do we know about that in terms of the online space?
It's worrying, guys. You know, men pointing out the obvious, how misandric the world actually is, that's worrying, right? We got to keep men down.
We know from various sociological studies that there's been a trend towards increased misogynistic beliefs amongst especially young people in Western countries.
Really, so, you know, the ancient Greeks in the past, and you know, the society was so misogynistic in the past, but now somehow are increasing.
And our research here in Australia found that this is also consistent in the population survey we did, that young people were expressing quite worrying misogynistic attitudes and attitudes sympathetic of the legitimacy of using violence against women in order to, I guess, enforce these misogynistic ideals.
Yeah, like who and what? Again, guys, notice no one's ever pointed out. Why isn't anyone, for two reasons. One, you could actually examine it and see they're full of shit. But two, they want to include every man, and every boy, too. Little boys are not exempt from these hate mongers.
And my interpretation of this is that it's very much influenced by these online forums where, you know, we know the algorithms create this sort of echo chamber of views. And
yeah, guys online are actually discussing their life experiences, and we're coming to conclusions. Yeah, and that's going to be stopped, right?
A push towards more extreme and radical content. And so you have these influencers gaining enormous traction, like Andrew Tate, for example.
There you go. We're bringing up Andrew Tate, right? But he'll just be a misogynist. He won't be an extreme misogynist. Because again, he's just a punching bag. This Andrew Tate actually facilitates what this monster wants. The scamming of men. Right? Andrew Tate is completely anti-male. But what he does is he gives men the facade of hope. And that has to be crushed.
I think this is having a pretty extreme effect on our young people in Australia as well.
Are there any signs that Australia would follow suit with our classification and our treatment, our understanding of extreme misogyny?
I think our current policy framework...
How can you understand something that you never define?
Doesn't really allow for it, but I'm hopeful that this is changing. We see some moves and reception from policymakers at different levels of government in Australia to better understand what the connection might be.
We've heard enough, guys. I'm not going to last what, 50 seconds or whatever. You're in trouble in England. Oh, by the way, before I end this though, I want to show you this is how misogynistic Britain is, right? Here, a young lady who committed sexual, well, no, not just a sexual assault, violent assault against her boyfriend, right? And this is how the male judge treated her.
When it came time to go to court, the judge, Ian Pringle, took a liking to Lavinia immediately. She was charged with unlawful wounding with intent, but the judge wasn't too keen on giving her any sort of sentence. In fact,
So this young lady was proven to attack her boyfriend with a knife. And this woman-worshipping piece of garbage, he wasn't keen on punishing her, right? So that's the misogynistic world that these women are living in. So take a good look, guys. This is UK. This is your future. I don't know why it's so much softer here in Canada, but we're going to follow suit eventually. So, I mean, I'm in trouble too, eventually. If men don't actively do something, don't be afraid to speak out, start talking with one another, and actually do what they do in South Korea. and form a political bloc. This is what we're heading towards. Monsters like this, wearing the human mask, out to attack us. But not just harm us perpetually. This woman does not want to see us dead. She wants us enslaved and punished forever. Thank you.